Good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-eun in Seoul. We have a lot on our plate today, so let's get started with the glimpse of the day's highlights. Korea is not alone when it comes to rising housing prices, as latest numbers show that property costs have been surging across the globe. Another terror attack has shaken Europe this week, this time in Brussels. How will the latest bombings affect the already fragile European economy? We'll sit down with an expert to find out more. We begin at Korea's manufacturing sector. After trailing for years, a new report shows that the sector's per capita labor productivity has surpassed that of Japan's for the first time. The report by Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade says the milestone was reached in 2014, significantly closing in on a gap that had Korea's productivity at just 34% of Japan's in the mid-1990s. Meanwhile, the hourly labor productivity was still seen to be at 86% that of Japan's. The think tank attributed this to the longer hours that Koreans worked, and it said Korean manufacturing staff worked 20% more hours than their Japanese counterparts in 2014. Korea's top 10 export products that make up roughly 75% of the country's total outbound shipments are losing competitiveness on the global stage. According to Korea Economic Research Institute, the proportion of Seoul's 10 leading export items in world trade declined 2.7 percentage points to 45.6% in 2014. Both the U.S. and Japan experienced a similar drop with their main exports, but the dip was smaller, while the ratio of China's top 10 export items in world trade climbed 1 percentage point. The Research Institute says it's becoming increasingly urgent for Korea to develop new export items, not only as it loses ground in global trade, but also sees a fall in export unit prices for 6 out of 10 of its leading outbound shipment items. Property prices have soared globally over the past 10 years, and while that may be great news for those who already own homes, the problem is more and more people, especially the young, are finding it almost impossible to get their own home. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Housing prices around the world have soared nearly 50% on average over the past decade. According to the Bank of International Settlements, Hong Kong saw the biggest jump. Hong Kong's property price index stood at 93.4 in the third quarter of 2005, but by the same period in 2015, the figure had surged to 305. That's up nearly 230%. To give that some context, if a house was valued at $3 million in 2005, it would be worth about $10 million 10 years later. Over the same period, Sweden saw its index jump nearly 92% and Norway nearly 83%. However, for the U.S., prices actually fell almost 5%, which is mainly attributed to a plunge in housing prices in the midst of the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. In general, worldwide, it's becoming harder for households, especially the younger generation, to buy a home, as the growth in income has not been rising as fast. Online pricing database Numbeo says people in 59 out of 102 countries worldwide would need to save their yearly income for at least 10 years in order to buy a house in their country. Hong Kong topped the list yet again with a price-to-income ratio of just over 37.5. This means the average worker would need to work almost 40 years in order to buy a house of their own. Vietnam and Ghana followed in second and third. South Korea sat in at 32nd place. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
The deadly attack on Brussels this week has been considered an attack on all of Europe, and as some say, on the European economy as well. Take a look.
The deadly explosions that rocked the Brussels airport and a subway station on Tuesday have affected public sentiment, tourism, and other activities across Europe. But market reactions to terror attacks in Europe have become less dramatic over the years, and analysts believe that the direct economic impact of the attacks will be short-lived. But there are still growing concerns that the incident in Brussels will add on to the difficulties that Europe's fragile economy is already facing and possibly derail the region's shaky economic recovery. For one, there are worries that these recent developments may affect an open borders policy that is critical to the European economy. Open borders allow easier movement of people and commerce in most of the European Union, as many companies have structured their operations across borders, with factories and offices located in multiple countries in the region.
And to tell us more about the economic impact of the Brussels attacks and what it all means for Europe, we're now joined by Professor Kim Se-won from Ewha Women's University. So good to see you, Professor.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so it seems that stock markets remained relatively calm after those bombings took place in Brussels. So what's the current situation like in the European market?
Well, European stock market recovered quickly after initial falling following terror attack in Brussels. France CAC and Germany stock and London's stock indexes all fall up to 2% at the beginning, but they recovered previous level.
So they were able to rebound.
Exactly.
But now the attack in Brussels came just 4 months after the Paris attacks, which left 130 people dead and a lot wounded. But analysts say that the economic impact that the Paris attacks had back in November was rather short-lived and limited. So what can you tell us more about the situation, what it was like back in November, what kind of impact the Paris attacks had on the European economy as well as financial markets?
Well, according to our experience with 9/11 attack in 2001 and last November's attack in Paris and other terrorist attacks, there's no lasting impact on stock market from terror attacks. They usually fade within 10 days after incidents, according to careful studies.
So that's what happened back in November as well.
Exactly.
All right, but then I think the biggest concern here is that the impact these attacks are going to have is on the Europe's real economy. Now, can you tell us more about that?
Well, the most affected real sectors might be tourism and hotels and airlines. And European countries' dependence on tourism is much higher than other regions. For example, France tourism contributes over 10% of the GDP, which is twice higher than Korea.
Oh, wow.
So real sector will be pretty much affected by a terror attack.
Now, I think we also have to take into account the fact that the European economy is already fragile and it's already facing some difficulties like deflation worries.
Well, the worst scenario that we can imagine is decreased income of the Europeans from tourism that can reduce the domestic consumptions. So that is a worst situation. And that, if that happens, that even aggravate the deflation problem of the European countries.
All right, let's shift over to Europe's open borders policy, which we heard a little bit in the report. Now, why does this policy matter so much, and what kind of impact will this have on the European economy if it were to be dissolved?
Well, that is really, really important and crucial problem in European unions. There are two fundamental axes that supports or maintains economic integration between European countries. The first is common currency, which is euro, and second is workers' mobility. So if they impose more restrictions on workers' mobility, that will hurt the fundamentals of the European unions.
All right. Well, what's the future, you think, in your opinion, of this policy? Do you think it will be able to be dissolved?
Well, ultimately, even though because of the terror attacks and political conflicts, quite a few countries will be trying to impose some regulations on labor's mobility. However, that they will recognize in the end that does not good for that is not good for the future economic prosperity of the European countries.
All right, now this Brussels attack comes after the Europe has been facing a lot of uncertainties already stemming from the so-called Brexit, right? And now analysts are saying that more voters are likely to vote in favor of Britain as exiting the European Union. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think the largest concern of the London is avoiding a terror attack in England's territory, and by doing that, they can save tourist industry in England. But the whole export to the after Brexit, the whole export to the European countries is much larger than the income from the tourism. So Brexit will be such a loss if they're pursuing that Brexit.
So you see a higher possibility of Brexit?
Yes.
In your opinion?
Yeah, politically, they will have a higher pressure for Brexit, but that is not working for future prosperity in terms of the GDP growth of the England.
All right. Well, I know this is stretching out this a little bit, but what kind of impact, if any, did this Brussels attack have on the Korean economy?
Well, we do not have a serious and high relation with European countries in economic terms. However, if European countries' problem continues further, there is a high possibility that U.S. Federal Reserve and Bank of Japan will be reshuffling their interest rate policy, and that will give a direct impact on Korean financial market and economy.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in today, Professor.
Thank you.
Rampant in China's black markets these days are Korean cosmetic knockoffs, having gained immense popularity from Chinese fans of Korean TV dramas and celebrities. So to counter this proliferation, Seoul has announced a hands-on approach, offering a stamp of approval for its popular brands. Our Lee Joo-young tells us more.
At a cosmetics store inside a big shopping mall in China, at first glance, this moisturizer looks like it's from a high-end skincare brand in Korea. But look closer and you'll realize it's a knockoff.
不然韩国公司和制的是吗？
应该是，它是那个韩国出的配方，中国生产的东西。这是防过敏的，我自己都用的就是这个。
The popularity of Korean goods from consumers in other countries has shot up over the years. According to Korea Customs Service, foreign purchases of Korean goods on local e-commerce websites have been on a steady rise from 2011, reaching $161 million last year. And China is by far Korea's largest customer base, accounting for about 46% of total sales overseas. But with this surge, the counterfeit market in Asia's largest economy has seen a boom as well. Particularly popular are rip-offs of Korean makeup brands, accounting for nearly 40% of all cosmetic products sold online in the country. Experts say this widespread practice of producing fake goods is prompting Korean brands to take legal action while posing significant health risks to consumers as well. This is why Korea Customs Service said it will implement an authentication system to distinguish original Korean cosmetics from knockoffs by providing them with special QR code labels.
The problem is there are too many counterfeits in China. I believe knowing that the goods have passed Korea's customs clearance will help give Chinese consumers more confidence.
The customs agency says it plans to run trial operations of the new verification system starting from July this year and later offer full implementation. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
Korea's resort island of Jeju served as a backdrop to the 3rd International Electric Vehicle Expo this week. And as the curtains close on this Thursday, our Eunice Kim takes a look at the progress of EVs and how an ambitious goal from Jeju Island ties in with it.
Rows of tangerine farms, the dormant Mount Hallasan volcano, and the Haenyeo who hunt sea creatures in the blue ocean waters free of equipment. These are some of the things Jeju Island is known for. But it's also slowly carving out a place for cars, that is, EVs. Over the past 7 days, Jeju Island hosted the world's largest pure electric vehicle expo. It was the 3rd time it did so, but interest this year was markedly higher. The number of vendors hailing from 24 countries doubled to 145. From city cars to racing cars, farming vehicles, and even electric bikes, all things EV filled the showroom floor, as Hyundai Motor launched its fully electric version of the Ioniq for the first time.
You can circle Jeju Island on a single charge and still have power left over. The Ioniq boasts the best mileage among EVs in Korea.
Selling EVs has been no easy task. With gasoline prices remaining cheap, car makers are now pushing other selling points, like the EV's smoother handling, faster exhilaration, and a quieter engine. Advancements in battery technology are also driving down their costs, enabling automakers to pass on the savings in the sticker price. On the challenge of infrastructure, the Jeju government plans to more than double the number of charging stations to 7,000 this year, all part of its ambitious goal to turn all vehicles on its roads into electric cars, with 75,000 charging stations on hand built over the next 14 years.
Jeju Island has a sense of mission to lead the search for solutions amid challenges and different experiences it encounters.
From business leaders to mayors of like-minded cities, thought leaders of the industry shared this sentiment as they discussed everything from building a complementary regulatory environment to a global standard for EV charging systems, laying the groundwork for a truly carbon-free world. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
All right, that does it for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.